All right, I hope you can all hear me well. And I first want to say that this is probably a bit of a different talk than I usually give. And it took me a moment to think about what I actually want to talk to you about. And the organisers had a lot of areas to cover. And in 7 minutes, I think we're not going to manage everything. First thing first, this is how I got to end up in academia. Everyone's path is different, and there's no patent recipe of how you're going to be a PI eventually or wherever you're going to end up. And I'm going to actually start this talk with a bit of geography, because for me, ending up in academia had a lot to do with moving countries and moving labs. So this is where I started. I trained as a BSc and an MSc at the Swiss Veterinary Institute of Technology, ETH, in Zurich. I'm Swiss originally, as you may hear once in a while in between. I studied biology as an undergrad, and at ETH you have 2 years of hardcore lectures, but the third year of your bachelor is what I would call shopping year. Whereas you have lectures Mondays and Tuesdays, you're actually spending the rest of the week in research labs doing research projects, which allows you to shop around in different areas, in different labs. And that's where I met this guy, or this monster. This is Vaccinia virus, and I was working on a project, on a very, very minor project actually, in the lab of Ari Helenius. And I literally got infected with the virus bug. I found it quite interesting how clever a cell biologist that Vaccinia actually is, how this virus knows more about the cell that we will ever learn. And I got interested in studying the virus. That's why I started working as a voluntary intern in Ari's lab for most of my holidays where we didn't have exams. And I developed new recombinant virus tools, familiarized myself with virology and cell biology. And even though I originally was planning to do my MSc in biological chemistry, and I still did an awful lot of organic chemistry and synthesis in my master's as well, but I ended up finishing in biochemistry because I thought that was more suited to what I needed, because I wanted to continue in virology. It was not unfruitful to work in Ari's lab. I got 2 publications out of it. And I was like, right, let's move on and let's go somewhere else so I can learn something new. And that's when I made the move to the Netherlands. I went to Utrecht University and the veterinary faculty there to do a PhD on coronaviruses. So I moved from a DNA virus to a single-strand RNA virus. I moved to the dark side, something a bit more mutagenic, even though coronaviruses still have proofreading function. But the other driver for me to go to Peter Rothier's lab was also that the position I was offered was within an EU ITN network, an initial training network. It means you have different labs all around Europe, and you have trainings in all those different labs. I learned about EM structural analysis in Stockholm. I learned about biophysics in Berlin, and about computational analysis from people of Israel. So actually it expands your horizon, and importantly, it builds a massive network, because every one of those people knows more people, and that is how you actually get to know other people that you could collaborate with, that you could do a postdoc with, and so on and so forth. And that's when, after my PhD, I decided to move countries. And surprisingly, this had absolutely nothing to do with connections or anything. It mostly had to do with my now husband. He had a permanent job. I just had finished a PhD. He was in Scotland. I was still in Holland. So I had to choose where to move to, and I decided I don't want to move to Glasgow, even though Glasgow has a fantastic virology program, but I was really not fond of the weather. So I looked around what I would like to do in the UK, and I found a group at the Roslin with which I would like to work with. And they had funding for me. It was the group of Paul Biggard working on flu, but only for a year. And suddenly this position came up working on arterioviruses, PERS, and doing genome editing. And it really felt a bit like this job advert had been written for me. It had all the different requirements that I had with virology, working on coronas, which are very closely related to arterioviruses. And I had good training on cell biology, which was required to work with macrophages. And I knew the genome editing was something I could learn. And that is how I came to the Roslin Institute. I applied for the position, I got the position, and I started to work with pigs and pig viruses. You'd think it's quite a stretch from working with viruses. It's actually probably more coming home for me, because turns out my parents have an SPF nucleus breeding herd in Switzerland. So they're pig breeders. So this was a very close link, and actually with a lot of support from the Institute, I ended up moving into a career track fellow position last year, which is an assistant professor position. And I was lucky enough to already obtain quite a bit of grant funding for genome editing, diagnostic tool development, but I also have a PhD student who works more on host pathogen interaction studies on a cell biological level. So it's been very successful. But what has influenced my decisions to move labs, to move countries? First thing, it was driven by learn something new. Don't get stuck just because it's convenient. It's very easy in academia, if you know somebody else in your institute that has a position, just to move. It really helps you to expand your network as well. And also, new countries always teach you something new. It might be a new language, but it also is a different way to work. I definitely noticed that when I was moving to the Netherlands, because I find they have a much different attitude to work-life balance and to work efficiently, not 24/7. So you learn how to actually structure your day better. You have maybe less of a lunch break, but you manage to get 3 or 4 experiments through in a day instead of just 2. And that means maybe you can also stay away from the lab on Saturday for a time. And then, of course, as I already told you, private decisions came into account here. My husband made me move here, and actually it was a very lucky move. We got married 2 years ago, whilst I was still a postdoc, and we're still married, so we've not gotten there. Right, I need to speed up. So what helped my career? First thing is definitely determination. Be determined what you want and tell your bosses that you want it. It helps if you put yourself out there, lead research gatherings, anything. But of course, you also have to work for it. And at the end of the day, it's also just luck that plays into it. And for me, definitely the pigs were quite lucky. So it's also obviously networks and supportive labs and mentors or supervisors are always a good thing. And I hope in the future, for future scientists, this is not a long stretch of male supervisors. I definitely also had good female role models in this. What would I advise to young scientists? Find the career path that is right for you. Academia is not the only way you can go. You can go into industry, into patent law, into laboratory design, into virtual lab environments, design computational things, government. The world is your oyster, and really choose what you want. Especially when you move up in academia, it's not only about research anymore. It's also about finding funding, managing a lab, managing your finances. So it becomes a very different job very, very quickly. Choose projects that interest you. Again, don't just move for convenience. You spend an awful lot of your time on the projects you work on. If you don't like them, you're not going to succeed. You're going to make yourself miserable. Move countries or at least labs. Every lab will teach you something new. And as I said, don't be afraid to go for positions that are above your pay grade and ask for things. I went for a position above my pay grade after my first postdoc and I got it. And it's worth it. But also find a decent work-life balance. There's too many PhD students and postdocs with mental disorders these days. Make sure that you take time out. It helps you be creative as well. If you're constantly at work, you cannot think about anything else. So take a bit of time once in a while. It makes you more creative. And that's it. Thank you. Questions?
I have one question. The 10-year track position, of course, a lot dependent on that. Was that an open vacancy? Did you suddenly have the opportunity, or was it because you were already in the lab that you immediately got into that? Or was it a competitive?
It was a competitive
advertisement?
Yes, it was a competitive advertisement. It went through a few cycles of different things. I had also applied for fellowships at the same time, and I actually had to pull out of one of the competitions because I already had been offered a position here. But it was competitive. It definitely also helped already being here, just because people know you. That always helps, but that also helps if you build your network otherwise.
And are there requirements after 5 years, or I don't know how long in Belgium it's 5 years, you have to produce, after 3 years already, a report, after 5 years a report, because there are some requirements to have achieved.
Yes.
And if you didn't achieve in Belgium, you're not allowed anymore to stay at the university, at that university. You cannot apply anymore for any position.
I presume here you could go back to like a postdoc position, but the way it is here, you have to write a report every year. Requirements are, for instance, acquiring competitive grant funding, publishing, those are the major ones.
And say how many? Do you have a list of what you have to accomplish?
They are a bit vague on that one, but basically it's pretty much at least 2 publications a year as a corresponding author. But I presume there's always room, because some people, for instance, in bioinformatics, maybe are more collaborators. But we have a 4+1 system eventually. So after 4 years, you get an evaluation. Outcome 1 is you're promoted to a group leader position. Option 2 is you get a year to improve yourself. And option 3 is, thank you, it was great, but you have a year to look for another job, basically.
Being a young scientist, do you think that all the internet tools now you have will has changed the way to network and to move around, and like all the LinkedIn, all those new tools we didn't have as young scientists? Do you think it's something you really use to keep your network and be active and move and change countries and lab?
Yes, I mean, especially for international, it makes international collaboration so much easier. I've got projects with scientists in the Philippines. Without Skype, that would be a very slow process and a lot of traveling. It takes 24 hours to go there and 24 hours to come back just in travel time, and you're usually not there for very long if it's just for collaborative travel. So it makes a world of difference. I'm also involved in an Erasmus Mundus Masters. That is my teaching duty at the moment. And we have 3 location masters, 2 in Barcelona and here in Edinburgh. And if we'd constantly have to travel for communications, that would be impossible. So I think it makes the world more interesting for both students as well as scientists.
So you always stay in academia, you never go in other fields like private sector stuff. During all your career, do you think about leaving academia, or you always want to stay in this?
It's an interesting question. I think I might have to answer this in 4 or 5 years' time. At the moment, I find it very exciting. I actually like the movement into different areas, into different positions, managing a group, doing the people management aspect, but also defining your own areas of research. And I was in the fortunate position that I already could do that quite a bit during my PhD and my postdoc. My supervisors always allowed me to explore my own research interests beyond the project I was assigned. And again, if you don't ask for that, you'll not be told to do something else but your project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's not supposed to work. It's a clamp.
So now, Carmen Galan, she's from Ingenasa, so it's from Virbac.
And so she's going to present her career right now.
It's already
What?
And so I've already pulled up your presentation. If you just go down to this one.
Okay, so going viral would be the title of my career path. And if we check what are the key requirements for a content to go viral in internet, we can find that it has to be something amazing or breathtaking, also fun, imaginative, better if provocative or controversial, or either helpful and unique. It must have an emotional connection, and very importantly, it should be distributed using the right channels and the right influencers. So I was starting looking for those ingredients, and I started my PhD in an amazing wall of animal viruses, and I joined the lab of Luis and Juanes in the National Center of Biotechnology in Madrid. And I started studying the coronavirus replication mechanism, both sequences required and cellular proteins and viral proteins involved. So by using reverse genetic system and the transmissible gastroenteritis coronavirus as a model, we could find that the viral nucleoprotein had an essential role in coronavirus replication. We also studied the cis-actin signals that they were required for coronavirus replication. We were located at both ends of the genome. And it was 2002 when we were engineering coronavirus vectors when something breathtaking just happened. This was the SARS outbreak that put coronaviruses in the forefront of world's attention. So in a joint effort in the lab, we assembled together a SARS coronavirus infectious clone and a replicon, and this opened up a new line of research in the lab. So I went back to the coronavirus replication mechanism because I wanted to identify which cellular proteins were interacting with the replication signals located at the ends of the genome. And the right channel to do that was a collaboration with the lab of Alexander Akulichev at Oxford University. So very quickly in his lab, I could set up the assay and identify the binding proteins by mass spectrometry. And then once back in Madrid, we spent some time studying the role of those proteins on coronavirus replication. And then it was time for me to go for a postdoc, and with this decision-making process, which is highlighted here. So basically, I wanted to change a little bit the field. I was fascinated by the non-coding mammalian genome. I also wanted to go through the right channels to have the support of a strong lab and a strong institution. But not only that, I wanted also a place to enjoy. And because of personal reasons, I want a convenient connection to Madrid in order to keep in contact with my significant other. So this place happened to be Freiburg in Germany, where I joined the lab of Thomas Janowijn at the Max Planck Institute of Immunobiology and Epigenetics. So his lab studied very basic questions about non-coding RNAs and mammalian heterochromatin, which is especially challenging to study because it's made out of repeats. So as you can imagine, going into this mechanism is not easy. So we together could draw an epigenetic map for the heterochromatin, and we also decipher what is the silencing mechanism for endogenous retroviruses and active line elements, specifically in ES cells. So the RNA project was even more challenging and more fun because we were studying the non-coding RNAs coming out of heterochromatin, and at the end we find out that they are forming RNA-DNA hybrids and that they are also forming nucleosomes, and this is one of the hallmarks of mammalian heterochromatin. And this project was not only fun because of the mechanism definition itself, but also this creativity required a nice group of people, which is depicted by this cocktail of flags, and it was very nice to work together with. So I could, perhaps thanks to the long winters in Germany, I could also use my creativity outside of the lab, and I did my first photography and also painting exhibitions. And then after 5 years of postdoc, it was also time for me to go for my next step, and again, another decision-making process. And at that time, my requirements were different. I wanted to move to an industry setup, so still stay in research, but something more applied. So maybe something like applied research, of course, to go for a challenging project in a good institution, but also compatible with starting a family. So I was looking to go back to Madrid, but because of the financial crisis, there were very few open positions in science by that time. So probably the more difficult decision I have taken was just to quit and come back without having anything secure. So for the transition, I decided to join a business school program. So I studied in IE Business School in Madrid, like an executive program for researchers, and this worked quite well for me. It was a nice transition, and I learned a lot of different things, and it was also fun to do, and a good transition to industry. And finally, I found the right place for my next career step, and this was Ingenasa. Ingenasa is a strong biotechnology company with more than 35 years in the market of veterinary diagnostics and also food quality. So what makes the company so unique is the strong research focus. Actually, the R&D department accounts for half of the company. So as an example, these are the projects of external funding that we have right now ongoing. And these are the core technologies that we use and we offer service for. And all this translates into a broad catalog of more than 100 references. So my role within the company was to start a new research line for novel diagnostic tools for aquaculture. And now I have 2 lines of research, one focusing on fish viruses, and the other one is a participation in a European project that addresses fish parasites. So just an example, and I have a poster outside with more details. We have obtained other virus-like particles, and they are nice tools which we can develop specific antibodies, diagnostic assays for CBAS, and they are also promising vaccine candidates. Yeah, I finished. So those are the ingredients that they work for me. And this will be also my advice to starting scientists. Try to find something amazing, a nice project that motivates you, in a nice working environment. Don't be afraid of changes. Keep and take care of your emotional connections, and always use the right channels and the right institutions to work for. Thank you.
We have time for
We talked a lot about the differences between industry and academia, and given you experienced it clearly, could you comment on the differences or similarities of research within the two settings?
So in terms of science, when you work in academia, and especially when you work on fundamental, very basic questions, you are a bit more free and you can be more open in the way that you conduct your research. As far as something is unpublished and new and relevant, you can maybe open a bit more the possibilities if your funding allows for. But if you go to industry, you are more, at least, prototype driven. So you want to study something because ultimately it could be some prototype that could be applied in industry in case of veterinary diagnostics, for instance. So it's a bit more narrow, the focus. In terms of pressure, maybe in academia you have more publishing pressure. Meanwhile, in industry you are more market pressure or competitors pressure. And in terms of daily work, well, as I have said, in my company, the R&D department works very much as a research department in terms that if we have so many European projects, you have to do the project reporting and accomplish the goals, the same as in academia. But we have a rich environment in the sense that we work in many different projects in the same setting. But on the other hand, we don't have for instance, the regular seminars that you will have in a research institute, in which maybe weekly you have nice speakers coming up and giving seminars. So you have to be updated and to look for the scientific outputs a bit outside. It could be, but probably it's not very typical industry I'm working with.
Thank you very much. We have no more time because of the fact that we have to leave before 6. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
The very last presentation is by Arnaud Martzolff. He's from Virbac. So this is from Virbac. And so he's going to share with us his experiences in scary.
Open yours.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for inviting me today. I'm going to present my experiences and especially my job today at Virbac, where I've been working for 2 years now. So here is an overview of all my experiences. As you can see, there is a part of academic first, and 3 professional experiences on the right. So, I started in Strasbourg doing my bachelor and master's degree. And then I had the opportunity to go to the USA, to the Ohio State University, which is a very big university. In France, a university like that, we call that a city. It's so big. And then I decided to come back to France to do a PhD in the GEPA lab. It's in Nantes University. And after that, I decided that I did my time of academic work, and I decided to go to industry. So it took time. I thought about that yesterday. It took me around, from my PhD defending to my permanent job at Virbac, it took me 3 years. So let's have a look more in details of my experiences. So thanks to my master's internship, I had the opportunity to go to the USA, and that was maybe one of the best decisions I made. So I spent a year in the USA. I trained my English. I discovered a new culture. That was very, very interesting. And because French people usually don't know where Columbus is, I had a map. It's not Columbine, it's Columbus. It's in Ohio, and it's very nice. So after that, I was very sure I wanted to do a PhD. And I found lab, the GEPEA, which is working on biological process engineering, and especially on microalgae. So I put microalgae here and a photobioreactor. So my job was to study, to do a systemic analysis of carbon and energy metabolism of this particular microalgae, to design a metabolic map and do metabolic flux analysis. So that was very interesting, but I decided to go to work on more concrete projects. So here are the three experiences in companies. The first was in Lille, so it was a new city, again I moved, and it was a startup. So I worked on the production of very specific molecules. But the thing you have to remind is that it was a startup environment, and it lasts 6 months. And after that, I decided that I wanted to go to a bigger company. And when I meant bigger, I was not thinking about the biggest, because Sanofi was the next company. It took me time, actually, to arrive to Sanofi, because I had to change my resume. I had to think about my career. So my advice would be patient. If you know what you want, just be patient. And finally, I did it. So I went to Sanofi in Rouen, in France, again, on a very big manufacturing site where they were manufacturing vaccines. And so I did all these interesting things that you can read here, but the most important thing, that it helped me to learn pharmaceutical company language and procedures. Because CGMPs, it's not really easy to learn. And quality management, it's something absolutely different from my academic experiences. So again, it took time, but it was very important to learn this language. And that's what I will remain from this experience. And after that, I decided, because I was working on the fill and finish production, I decided to come back to the lab. I wanted to work in a laboratory, and very easily, with this Sanofi experience, I found maybe the job of my dream at Virbac, where I am a biological process development manager. So a few words on Virbac. So Virbac is a big company making a lot of money, employing a lot of people, and selling products in more than 100 countries. If we have a look at the ranking, you can see that Virbac is the 7th pharmaceutical lab in the world. But you can also see that the 4 in green are also producing, working for human products. So if we just have a look on companies specialized in veterinary products, Virbac is the 3rd one. So here is a description of what I'm doing every day. I won't read that. So I'm working in under GMP environment. I'm working on viral and cellular and bacterial processes. We are doing upstream processing. We are doing downstream processing. We are absolutely not doing research, only development. And we concretely we manufacture vaccine pilot batch that will be tried on animals then. Also this year I had a new job, which is to manage an outsourced manufacturing. And this is very interesting, very international work. So Virbac gave me this opportunity to develop my skills. So I'm working, of course, with a technical team. I have interactions with all the R&D departments. and I'm participating to the lab management. So I learned many things at Virbac, and I'm glad of that. So my conclusion is, come join Virbac. Thank you for your attention.
Everyone who's presented seems very happy with the decisions that they've made. And there was a question earlier about going from academia to industry. My question is, supposing you make that jump and you find out that maybe industry is not for you, and obviously it's working for you, but in your experience, is there a window where if someone decides that actually they've made that jump to industry, that they need to then start thinking about going back into academia? Is there a time frame? Because obviously you're going to lose a publication record and so on before you go back. Have you got any experience of that or any views on that?
So the question is if I want to come back to academia?
Or have you seen anyone who's gone to industry? As I said, you're obviously very happy with your decision. Have you seen anyone who's gone into industry but then decided they want to go back into academia?
I don't know any example of that. I know many people from academia going to industry, and I don't know the opposite. I don't have example. And concerning my... I think you can. You can, it is possible, but for my part, I won't do that.
I saw a couple of the example of the reverse case that people who work in the industry and then come back to the academia, which it has very hard time because there is no publication. So the university gave the 2-year or 3-year certain period of time as a postdoc to publish, and then try to accept it and try to more give the flexibility to apply. So, but as we pretty much know that after you go to the industry, because of publication is pretty much shut down, it's hard to come back unless that certain company has a flexibility to give the like a field research area case, they have the publication. But other than that, certain universities have that kind of option that give the postdoc position first, couple of year gap. But still it's hard.
Yes, I know that at Virbac some people from the clinic department are publishing. That's not my case because what I do is absolutely confidential.
So I think, yeah, Jonathan, just a very quick, because I was just going to say that that's about transferable skills, and you know, people from industry would have transferable skills that you would think would go back into academia.
I'd give you my own experience because I've gone in and out of applied versus academia, and it depends what you're doing. So there is a great demand for people who've got industry experience in academia, and if you're looking at the British case, there's a lot of demand for impact cases now. So how do we link back into industry? So I think it's important that we bear that in mind. And just one comment. One thing that's been really nice seeing your 3 presentations is your communication skills. Language is incredibly important, and actually having environments where we improve our social and emotional intelligence is incredibly important in terms of how we proceed. And I think you've all demonstrated that you've got very high levels of that, and it's an important component of success. I don't think we pay much attention to that, and I think it's something we perhaps should discuss.
Thank you.